the work of creation had not proceeded apace, and in a sullen mood, he gave up that body too. Yehi yantamuta kesha ahayastain najangrinde sharapa prasarpata krura naga bhogoru kandaraha. O dear Vidura, the hair that dropped from that body transformed into snakes, and even while the body crawled along with its hands and feet contracted, there sprang from it ferocious serpents and nagas with their hoods expanded. Sa'atmanam manya manaha krita krityam ivat mabuhu tadamanun sarsajante manasaloka bhavanan. One day, Brahma, the self-born, the first living creature, felt as if the object of his life had been accomplished. At that time, he evolved from his mind the Manus, who promote the welfare activities of the universe. The final verse. Tebya so srijat sriyam puram purusham atmavan tandrishtva ye pura srishta prashasham su prajapatim. The self-possessed creator gave them his own human form. On seeing the Manus, those who had been created earlier, the demigods, the Gandharvas, and so on, applauded Brahma, the Lord of the universe. Om Ajnana Timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Jagaguru Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Samavita Gaur Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai. So, yes, this, I guess, is a very quick discussion on Srimad Bhagavatam, but something that I thought was interesting is just to give this in context, the whole chapter. So, yeah, because the verses themselves, if you just try and see those few sections of verses that we're speaking on, often doesn't make full sense. So, yeah, this is the conversation between Maitreya and Vidura. And throughout this whole chapter, it's describing the creation of the living entities, the different kinds, the different species, how the manifestation evolves and expands from Brahma. And so specifically in this chapter, in text 9, Vidura says that he's asking, what did Brahma do to create living beings after evolving the Prajapatis, the progenitors of all living beings? And essentially, how did they evolve? How did they manifest this universe? And then did they evolve the creation in conjunction with their respective wives? Did they remain independent in their action? Or did they all jointly produce it? So this is all very detailed descriptions and information of how the material universe that we are currently in is created. And it's interesting that Maitreya says that when the combination of the three modes, the equilibrium, the stasis position, the balance of the combination of three modes of nature was agitated by the unseen activity of the living entity, the jiva, by Mahavishnu, and by the force of time, the total material elements were produced. So these three, the jiva, the unseen activity of the jiva, by Mahavishnu, and by the force of time, the total material elements were produced. And then it goes on to explain more how from ego 5 principles are produced and all these kinds of things. So yeah, it's a very detailed description of the material universe, material creation. And I found it very interesting that within this chapter and also within these verses, it's describing how Brahma manifests different living entities and different species, because constantly we hear that from Brahma's mind emanated these living entities, and from when Brahma gives up his body, it says that he sheds his body, or he gives up this kind of body for one reason or another. In one of these, first verse we read, it's saying that Brahma was in a very sullen mood because he felt like he was not doing a proper job in the creation of the material universe. So in a sullen mood, he gave up his body, he shed the body. And I was always curious about this because, when we shed our body, we die. That's the process of reincarnation. We shed one body and accept another body. But Prabhupada states in the purport of text 28 of this chapter something very interesting. He says in Srila Sridhar Swami's commentary that the Lord, however, asked Brahma to give up his present body because it had created the demoniac principle. According to Srila Sridhar Swami, Brahma's constant dropping of his body does not refer to his actual giving up of his body. Rather, he suggests that Brahma gave up a particular mentality. Mind is the subtle body of the living entity. We may sometimes be absorbed in some thought which is sinful, but if we give up the sinful thought, it may be said that we give up the body. So that's a very interesting point, that Brahma's shedding of these bodies, as it's stated, or Brahma's giving up of these bodies, is not a gross physical body, but a subtle mentality. And just as Prabhupada says, in the same way, sometimes we have sinful thoughts or uncongenial thoughts for devotional service and for the advancement of spiritual life. And so in a similar way, we can actually shed that body. We can get rid of those thoughts, propensities, desires, and we can, in a sense, have a new body. We often experience that in devotional service, which is very interesting, that after some practice, because we all come from a contaminated background, more or less, some will say that, well, I was born in a very pure family, or I was this or that, but, still, why are we in this material world? We're not pure. That's the point. So we experience that we all come from somewhat of a contaminated background in one way or another, and to different degrees. But after some practice of devotional service, we find that it's almost like we're a different person in some sense. We have shed those bodies, those subtle mentalities, conditionings of desire to enjoy the senses or for sinful activity. And in a sense, we have a new body. We're a new person. They have this concept in Christianity of being born again. So in the same way in devotional service, when we not just do a ritual of initiation, or we believe, that's not our philosophy, but when we actually put the words of Shastra into action, when we, as we say in America, when we put our money where our mouth is, when we actually really perform the practice that we know will please Krishna and will actually benefit us. When we do that, then in a sense, we're born again. We have a new life in Krishna consciousness. And if we pursue that, then we get the ultimate goal, going back to Godhead. And it's our choice. Krishna gives us free will of how quickly we want to pursue that. If we want to take many, many lives, or we want to immediately do that. So that is our free will. That's completely up to us. And yeah, it's interesting also the many different categories of living entities that Brahma is mentally shedding from his body. It's quite interesting to think of this kind of creation. It's because with our minds we can create unlimited varieties of things, but we obviously don't have the same power as Brahma, that it becomes reality. We can think in our mind of a flying pig, or of a golden mountain, or of I don't know, whatever you think, unlimited things that we can think of, we can create within our mind, but we don't have that same capacity as Brahma does. We're not an empowered jiva in that sense to be able to actually manifest it. So these are very subtle energies, subtle principles of creation that are in existence, but we're not empowered, we're not in touch with, where with one's mind, one can actually manifest principles of creation. So it's very, I find it very fascinating, very interesting. And it's a very nice explanation of how we see the world around us, that it's not just all random, happened by chance, or from, the very interesting theory that from a big bang, from a big explosion, unlimited varieties of things manifested, which we see no reoccurring existence of ever happening. And it will never ever happen again, because it's just very simple logic that a car is created, it has a designer, it has a intelligence behind it that orchestrates and architects its creation. There's design behind everything. We never see that from an explosion comes a airplane or a tree or even a microbe. It's just not in our experience of ever happening. So therefore it's quite illogical to assume the whole existence of creation based on something that we have no evidence of, we can't prove, and we can't repeat the test, because this is the main principle actually of science. What we consider modern science is that it has to be, you have to have a theory or a hypothesis, and you have to have a test. If you can't test something, if it's not testable, and if it's not confirmable through an experiment, you can't call it science, actually. It's not scientific. It's simply belief, it's faith, it's a religion in that sense. So we all have to have faith, and we have to have either logical or illogical faith. So it makes a lot more sense to believe in something that's logical. For example, that everything we see has been created, right? It seems to have design, logic about it, laws of nature, and laws are created by intelligence. It's created by people. There's no such thing as, where we just stop at red stoplights because it just happened one day and manifested out of an explosion or whatever. So I think it's quite easy to understand. So we have about 5 minutes left, I believe, until we should conclude today's discussion. Just wondering if anyone had any reflections or questions that they would like to share. We can discuss more for the next 5 minutes. I don't know if there's a way to unmute or open it up. Lakshmikanta Prabhu, I think, knows how to do that.
Hare Krishna Prabhu. My name
Hare
is
Krishna.
Sweet, accept my humble obeisances. All glories to Srila Prabhupada.
Jai.
I like the point about the instead of quitting the body, quitting full mentality
Mm-hmm.
that you brought. Like my thoughts went like a few weeks before there was a National Suicide Week or something, and in corporate where it was promoted a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And taking that point and elaborating the as a takeaway message from today's class, that will help in getting that message, because statistically the root cause of many suicides are because of sinful guilt that is bothering one, and they're taking, and especially in these days in the software field it's pretty high, and they call
Yeah.
it blood pressure, but the root cause is combination of many factors. Thank you very much, Prabhu, on that message. Really appreciate
Yeah.
it.
That's a wonderful point. Thank you for adding that. Yeah, I was thinking about that specifically when reading a little bit about this, because yeah, we get so bothered by the mind, and we get so bothered by the mind generally because we're doing something that disturbs the mind. We're doing something, or we're living in such a way that's not in the mode of goodness, that's not pure, and therefore the mind becomes contaminated, and therefore we suffer. We experience anxiety and depression and stress, and we get attacked also. Oftentimes, suicide victims are subtly, in their subtle body, they're vulnerable to other living entities like ghosts or yeah, just because when you're in the mode of ignorance, it's very easy for such living entities to take advantage of that and try and possess your body or haunt your body. And yeah, we see a lot of cases with suicide victims where, I was hearing voices, or I felt compelled that I had to do, it's a common thing. So that's a very great point, that instead of shedding the body, the gross body, we can uh, shed the mentality. Yeah, we experience that with Krishna consciousness. It's a very powerful way of doing that. Thank you for that, Prabhu.
Thank you very much, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Can I ask a question?
Yes, please.
Again, on the same point, Prabhuji, thank you very much for bringing this wonderful point about shedding the subtle body in different layers. And often I think we hear the example of a butterfly, right? For a caterpillar to become a butterfly, it has to go through some severe transformation to become a butterfly. So my question is, often shedding these conceptions that we keep in our subtle body is not an easy transformation. It's a very tough one. When things are fine, it's hard to shed those conceptions, versus when something really happens or hits in our life, that's when we really take up it. So in that junction, there's two directions we can go into, right? Especially in Krishna, we can say, yep, I need this transformation. I need to go through this pain, or, and otherwise we give up also, right? We say, this is not for me. So how can one, create resilience or to accept transformation, even though it's painful?
Yeah, that's a very good question. Yeah, it's very empowering also to accept that method of transformation, because if we just stay stagnant, we really don't go anywhere. We just remain on the neophyte platform, or even worse, we just give up Krishna consciousness. Because in Kali Yuga, Vaisheshika Prabhu, a long time ago, I heard a nice class he gave. He's saying that in Kali Yuga, the tendency of everything is to degrade. So what happens if we just try and maintain anything but our Krishna consciousness or spiritual practice, or congregation or temple, whatever, if we just try and maintain exactly as we are, it must degrade. That means it will definitely degrade. If you just try and maintain, because of the influence of Kali Yuga, it will degrade. It will become worse. But if we try and improve, we strive to transform, to improve, then automatically, instead of degrading, it will actually increase and improve. So getting back to your question about how do we, even though it's painful, how do we accept this transformation? How do we accept this? We have to go through this process. Well, I mean, from my experience, something that's very powerful and very important is as a devotee and as a non-devotee, it's two different answers. But as a devotee, we have to understand that Krishna is omniscient, omnipotent, and omnibenevolent. So Krishna, these are, of course, Greek ancient philosophical terms, but omniscient means all-knowing, and omnipotent or omnipotent, depending which part of the world you're from, means he's capable of doing anything. So he has all power. And omnibenevolent means all loving, or all desiring your benefit, desiring your well-being. So if we have that understanding that Krishna is all these three things, then it's very easy for a devotee to understand and know that whatever Krishna is doing, it's got to be in my best interest because he knows everything. He's capable of doing or undoing anything. And he really is my best friend, Suhrit. He's my best well-wishing friend, and he's always with me. So if we have that understanding, then only really then it's possible to surrender to transformation and change. It's not always easy. That's just the reality, is that it's never going to be easy to surrender to Krishna's plan, because we all have our own plan, and we're still, until we're on the pure stage, we're still somewhat rebellious to Krishna's plan. But it's never going to be easy. But if we understand Krishna is these three things, then it becomes possible to surrender. Otherwise, not. If we don't understand these things about Krishna, then it's very confusing. It becomes like, what are you doing? Why are you doing this? I can't see why your hand is moving. So we have to have these three things. And oftentimes also it takes some faith in Krishna, not in the sense of cheap, just belief or cheap, cheap faith, but a logical, consistent experience of Krishna taking care of one. And that every time I have surrendered to Krishna, he's always done the best thing for me. He's always taken care of me. So therefore, in this difficult situation, if I surrender again, I can logically have faith that Krishna will also protect me. He'll have my best interest in mind, and it'll be the best thing for me to surrender to him. But yeah, I was just asking this question actually recently to a very senior devotee, and he was saying, don't be surprised that even advanced devotees experience calamities or difficulties. We see in Queen Kunti's teachings, also Bhaktivinoda Thakur, even Srila Prabhupada, when he was in Vrindavan, he'd left his family, he'd taken sannyas, he'd dedicated his whole life to fulfilling the instruction of his spiritual master. And Srila Prabhupada was in Vrindavan, and he got severely injured, gored by the horns of a bull. And then you can hear this lecture, Prabhupada, afterwards, he's saying, what is this? What is this? I've given up everything. What is this? Krishna, what are you doing? So we shouldn't be surprised that we have that reaction. What is this? Krishna, why are you doing this? This is difficult. This is whatever it is. We shouldn't be surprised because, in a sense, this is our line. This is coming in our sampradaya. All acharyas experience this feeling, but they have faith and they have the understanding to roll with the punches, in a sense. And sometimes it takes time to see Krishna's hand, but later on it will make sense. So,
Thank you so much, Prabhu. I think that was a very holistic answer, and it definitely convinces me here. Prabhu, you mentioned that there's also a non-devotee version of the answer. I'm just curious on that. Mm-hmm.
Right. Yeah. So for devotees, we have this understanding of like Krishna karma. Krishna directly is, in this verse, Tate Nukampam Susamikshamano, 10th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, Prabhupada says, in essence, that Krishna's hand is directly in play in the life of a devotee. So he personally orchestrates every activity in the life of a devotee, even things that may seem like sinful activities, reactions of sinful activity, or things that happen because of one's previous past karma. But actually the proper understanding is that it's Krishna's direct hand orchestrating events to purify the devotee of the remnants of his sinful mentality that may be there because of past activities. But for non-devotees, of course, we can say ultimately about anything, and then it just becomes very hard to understand. But ultimately, Krishna is, of course, in control of everything. But for the non-devotee, Mahamaya orchestrates his or her activities in life and the administration of their karma. So it's a little different for a non-devotee, because they can't say, oh, well, God is, omniscient, omnipotent, omnibenevolent. He's doing everything for my purification because, for one, they don't have that faith. They don't have that connection with God in the same way that they're trying to surrender to him. And yeah, they're being taught in a sense, like they have a different trainer. We have personal trainers who will teach us how to perfect our, whatever it is, art. Our art is we're trying to love Krishna through bhakti. And so Maya, in that sense, Maya is the trainer, is the personal trainer for the conditioned souls. So she's also trying to push them towards Krishna, but through means of suffering. She's trying to make them give up, just like stop doing this stupid things, so it's like constantly, with her trident, she's in many different ways, through mental suffering, bodily suffering, divine, or what do you say, adidaivic suffering, all these kind of things. She's trying every way possible to make the conditioned soul give up their mentality, push them towards Krishna. But yeah, they're so stubborn and so resilient. So for a non-devotee, how to accept change, how to accept transformation. I mean, you have to change your lifestyle. You have to change your philosophy. You have to change your consciousness of life to practice Krishna consciousness, practice bhakti yoga, or at least have some understanding of God, whatever tradition it is, whatever, because eventually you will come to Krishna if you have at least that leaning, that inclination towards loving God. Krishna will eventually bring you to understand him in his full potency and his full personality as Krishna. But for a non-devotee to accept these difficult things, to accept these changes and transformations, you have to accept a higher power. Otherwise, it's bewildering. You don't. There's no good explanation of reality, or of the interaction of the material elements, the modes of nature, the laws of nature, of the events in one's life. There's no real good explanation unless you have a higher power, and unless you have objective morality, that there is good, there is non-good or evil, whatever you want to say, and there is someone that is decides that and is administering medicine for each of us, how to come to that good higher state. So it's a little more complicated for someone who's not at least a theist, if not a devotee.
Yes, Prabhuji. Thank you so much, Prabhuji. It's very helpful. Thank you.
Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Please accept my humble obeisances. All glories to Srila Prabhupada.
Please accept mine.
Prabhuji, I just loved the discussion that you brought up this point, as even what Sati Sutta Prabhu had mentioned, that we have to let go of our subtle mentality when we are practicing Krishna consciousness. It goes away. It's not like the actual gross body. So my question to you about this is, sometimes we have these subtle, I guess, stereotypical, thoughts about specific, person or devotee, whatever it is, right? So how do we get rid of these kinds of subtle mentality of, having this judgment about someone?
Sorry, I just want to make sure I got that right. So
yeah,
subtle mentality of being a Christian or a devotee, or like, was that what you were saying?
No, not like, so means like, we know that some person, maybe let's say, is doing some bad thing, who's not a devotee, let's say. But then we have this judgment that automatically triggers in our mind that, okay, this is what this person is, not going to change. So I if we want to get rid of this kind of thoughts, how do we get rid of these subtle thoughts that we have, presumed judgment or stereotypical judgment?
Yeah, that's a great question.
Because of the experiences in the past.
Yeah, that's a great that's a great one, because it's hard, because the natural, I mean, the reason we're here is we have a superior mentality. You know, the reason we're in the material world is we want to be superior, we want to be better, we want to be better than ultimately Krishna. You know, we want to be Krishna. So then that lording it over propensity naturally extends to every living entity, and we're not. I mean, no one can really say they're physically better than everyone else, because everyone else will be better than you in some way physically. So then we extend that in a subtle way, that, oh, I'm more intelligent, or I'm more this, or I'm more that. And then in even a more subtle way, we extend it to, oh, I'm more cultured, or I'm more clean, or I'm more, I'm living according to higher religious principles than you. Yeah, your religion is not as advanced than mine, or your principles are, so yeah, it's the natural, well, it's not natural, but it's the, what we're conditioned by. So then to overcome that, something that I find quite helpful is but it's often challenging, and it's like a slap in the face, is you look at your own past and where you were before Krishna consciousness and what you were doing, and then you immediately, oftentimes the immediate reaction is just, oh, block those things out, push them away, forget about it, But when we're seeing someone, and there's some judgment, there's some, oh, this guy eating a hamburger, how, mlecha, disgusting, gross, rascal, nonsense, I mean, Prabhupada can say those things because he also had unlimited love, and was just externally chastising, so for their purification. But yeah, we really have to see, well, where was I before Krishna consciousness? And even if I think I came from a very high background, imagining where I was in past lives also, unless we're one of these very rare Nitya Siddhas that just descended and came, but then you wouldn't be thinking like this. But yeah, generally for most people, you can just think, what was I doing in my, earlier life? What were my desires? What did I think was the goal of life? What were my practices? And that very quickly and very easily shuts down this judgment mentality that, we immediately try to prove to ourselves that we're better in some way or another. And then, that's one thing, is seeing how we're also we were also fallen, but by the grace of our spiritual master, they've picked us up to some degree that we can live a purified life. But that's one thing. The second thing is that we should never underestimate how strong Maya is, that within a split second we can fall down to doing exactly the same things or worse. That it's not by our own, superhuman, amazing, we're just so great that we're pure. It's by the mercy of our spiritual master and our teachers, Srila Prabhupada, that they've given us some intelligence and some ability to be able to follow. All of our acharyas pray, Shakti Buddhi in Amiyati Din. I'm devoid of potency, I'm devoid of intelligence, and I'm extremely fallen. So that's the right mentality. And a third thing for is, if we look at the example given by our acharyas, but also specifically the most munificent incarnations of God, Lord Chaitanya and Lord Nityananda, that they uplifted, people like Jagai Madhai. They uplifted, very contaminated, very sinful, fallen, conditioned souls. That, I mean, Prabhupada says that everyone now is a Jagai Madhai, but when you really look at the life of Jagai Madhai, it's pretty severe. They were going around raping people, and, just drinking, constantly intoxicated with alcohol, and murdering brahmanas and all this kind of stuff. So to that severe extent, I mean, to deliver someone like that requires such a merciful personality that yeah, we can have confidence. Lord Chaitanya, Lord Nityananda certainly have potency, have the power to be able to deliver these people. We just have to push them in that direction. We have to give them a favorable impression. And we also, as instruments of Lord Chaitanya, Lord Nityananda, have to try and imbibe their mood of being a doshadarshi, not seeing fault. And, there's this nice verse about Lord Nityananda, Akroda Paramananda Nityananda Roy, Abhiman Shunya Nitai, Nagare Bidai, that is, has no anger, he has no envy, and he's very merciful. He is constantly giving this mercy to others. So it's in our line that we are meant to be instruments of this, not only for the public, for the devotees also. We might feel we're superior than some devotees where I've been practicing for more years, or I've taken, different levels of initiation than you, whatever the case is. But the mood of our sampradaya is to be the servant of the servant of the servant, that we're not better than anyone else.
Yeah, thank you for that. And specifically, I wanted to, really hone in on when let's say we have this subtle mentality of someone being a narcissist, and we want to get rid of that kind of subtle, mentality of having this because of, obviously that it's not that it's the personality that changed, but if we know this, how do we not get that in the middle of our dealings with someone like this, or like
if
how do we
someone
get rid
else
of
is
this?
a narcissist?
Yes, you're right. That was my main concern. Like, how do we deal with that subtle judgment in our minds?
Well, yeah, that's a good question. If someone really is a narcissist, like consistently, it's probably better you avoid them, because that's quite a dangerous mentality to have, and it's just harmful. If it's like trying to befriend a snake. You can't really. There's not really a good way to twist the relationship out of that. Unless, sometimes you have to work with someone, or you're forced by circumstance. But
so what do you do in those instances?
Right, because that's the thing. You can't give up your judgment. You can't give up your intelligence. You have to surrender with your intelligence. So, I've had some experiences personally of having to, being forced. Just, you can't get away from that. You just have to do the service, and you have to work with it. Well, one tendency is that if you are constantly criticizing in your mind that person, then you become like them. And I started seeing that personally, which is quite dangerous. And then I was like, I have to be careful because, if you're constantly, because naturally it's not a good thing to have those tendencies. You don't want it. It's not good for them to have it. So, it should be criticized, but in the right context, like, for example, thinking that, feeling that I have to be very careful to avoid this in myself, not necessarily that this person is so bad, they're doing this, they're doing that, they're always seeking admiration, they're always feeling so high of themselves, they're always, all these things, because then the tendency is we will also absorb that behavior. But instead, to see the danger of it, to see like, wow, this person, I feel very compassionate and very, I feel empathy for this person, that I have these same tendencies, but, Krishna has somehow given me intelligence to check it. And this is what the result would be if I didn't.
Right.
It's very dangerous. So, we have to have empathy for those persons, because, specifically trying to see why they have these tendencies, that can also really help. That, like, for example, this person was abused for so many years, they were kept down, they were like, they were really squished under someone's rule or management or whatever. And then now they have this desire that let me be the top dog, let me have all the glory, let me have all the fame, and everyone should serve me and all these kind of things. Then it doesn't justify it at all, not at all, but it helps us understand, like,
The why behind,
kind of have compassion.
Right.
But that's very different than justifying it. We also have to draw that designation that this is absolutely a horrible way to behave, and we should be very careful not to absorb that, but at the same time have some empathy that unfortunately this person is as a reaction to all these other things that they couldn't process properly, they have these tendencies. It's not a good person to befriend if you have the choice.
Yes,
Definitely.
All right, thank you so much, Prabhuji. That's helpful.
Okay.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Vanaji. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Please accept my humble obeisance. So I'm going to Srila Prabhupada.
Please.
I know. Prabhuji, 1 second. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Yeah.
Yeah. So I know it's over time, but I want to ask one last question, if it's okay with
Sure.
you.
That's fine by me. Yeah. If anyone needs to go, I completely understand. Work and all kinds of things. But I'm happy to.
So wonderful class and wonderful discussions. You were, like the verse mentions about Brahma dropping his body, and Prabhupada compares it to the mindset, changing the mindset. One example that comes to my mind is Ajamil, where he drops his pious body and he picks up a sinful body, and it really takes him a long time to get back into another pious body. If you go by that analogy. But what I was observing throughout was how we consider the mind conveniently, like, I don't say everyone, at least me, when among the spiritual or the devotees, mind is an other object, a third person. Whereas in other conversations, when it is convenient, it becomes me. Oh, I want this. Actually, this is not I, this is actually the mind wanting it. So I am relating these two things, and how do we really deal with this sort of a thing? Because material life, we mix both of them. I can't go to office and say, hey, my mind wants this, or my intelligence wants this. They'll kick me out.
Yeah.
I have to be very, very clear. So we keep, though we try to draw the line, we have to behave like that in one sphere of life, in the other sphere of life. We try to separate them out. It's so confusing, so I'll stop that.
That's a great observation. And actually, Bhaktivinoda Thakur talks about this in his book, Sri Chaitanya Shikshamrita. He describes that there's two kinds of ways that, as we're conditioned souls in a material world, that we have to interact with reality. Because, it's just ridiculous. Like, for example, if you go to the supermarket and you only speak in absolutes, like you go to the supermarket and you say, this conditioned living entity wants, this manifestation of the Supreme Personality of Godhead in the form of a bread. People are going to think you're completely crazy. So there's these two kinds of reality, Bhaktivinoda Thakur states. One is called Vyavaharik, or Bhaktivinoda Thakur describes, I believe it comes from Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, but it's called Vyavaharik and Paramartik. So Vyavaharik means your kind of regular daily, like just material existence, things like brushing your teeth, taking a shower, feeding the body. These are vyavaharik duties of the material, maintaining your material existence. So we simultaneously have to carry these on with our paramartic duties, which means our supreme goal. So activities which carry us to our supreme goal of life. So you have to, it's important to see life in both of these ways and simultaneously exist in both realms, paramartic realm and vyavaharic realm. Because if you take it too far, yeah, it becomes quite funny. If you just try and exist in the paramartic realm, you die pretty quickly. You don't feed the body, you don't shower, you don't bathe. It's not possible for Vaidhi sadhakas to exist only in the paramartic realm, nor is it possible only to exist in the vyavaharic realm, because then you're just doing the activities of the body and you don't have a supreme goal. There's not really it's not a spiritual practice, it's just a mundane life. So in regards to the mind, how to deal with the mind in regards to these two things, vyavaharic and paramartic, Prabhupada describes, I remember hearing that when the mind is behaving like a friend, you treat it like a friend. You whatever. You don't beat the mind then. But when the mind is misbehaving, which for a lot of us is very often, then you do have to beat the mind. You have to rein the mind back in and focus it on the lotus feet of Krishna and service. So in that sense, the mind is kind of like a child. We understand that it's in our care, it's in our jurisdiction, that we have to utilize it and harness it. And as long as it's behaving properly, we're happy, it's fine. We don't have to punish something unnecessarily. But to the extent that our mind misbehaves and tries to deviate and go all kinds of places, then you do have to beat the mind. And beating the mind means chanting Hare Krishna, really focusing on our service, reading Shastra, all these kinds of things to rein the mind back in. So, yeah, our mind often does seem to have a separate kind of consciousness to what we really want. The mind will go here and there. We see a beautiful man or a beautiful woman, or we see some hot, tasty treat on the street, and immediately the mind and senses just rush there and want to enjoy it. So yeah, it seems like often it's almost a separate entity, but we just have to understand that it's like a pre-programmed system, that for so long, because we haven't controlled the senses and the mind for who knows how many millions of lifetimes, that these programs are still going. And we just have to, in a sense, reprogram to focus our desire for love and enjoyment and pleasure and giving all those things in towards Krishna. And then when the mind becomes like that, we won't have to fight it. We won't have to beat it, and it will become one with our soul, one with our one in purpose, means with our actual desirable goal. Does that help answer that question, Prabhu?
Yeah, Prabhu, that was wonderful actually. Very, very extensive and very clear. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Hare Krishna. Okay, so there's no more. I think we can finish here and move on to other service. Okay, thank you very much, dear devotees. Please accept my obeisances. All glories to Prabhupada. Hare
Thank you,
Krishna.
Prabhu. Hare Krishna.
Thank you.